I want to do a video on Hebrew, the name Hebrew, the meaning of Hebrew. And the reason is there's an incident that I seen on the news that occurred in Moore, Oklahoma, where a person who was, to me, obviously a Hebrew, but the media is portraying him as Muslim extremist type person. Well, that person went to his place of work, and I'm going to say it's alleged. I assume that it's correct allegations and that there'll be evidence and substantial evidence to show what had happened is what is being claimed. Where the person went and murdered one of his co-workers, seriously assaulted another one of his co-workers, and he was basically on a rampage, and supposedly it had to do with him being fired from his work, but then there's conflicting statements coming out saying that he wasn't really fired from work, but well, I guess we're just going to have to wait to see all the facts come out. But from the facts that are out, and they are established facts, that, for example, this person had an alias name. And this person that they're calling a Muslim extremist because he had Muslim views and he was professing the Muslim religion. And he had the name of Keem Yisrael. Now, anybody that watches this video that studies anything about Israel and Hebrews and stuff like that and Muslims would know that somebody with the last name Yisrael is not particularly a Muslim, but an Israelite, as they would call themselves, or formerly was an Israelite. But what I'm going to bring forward in this video is there a connection between Muslims and Israelis? Excuse me. Now, there certainly is a connection where you look in the current nation of Israel and Gaza, that there's a Muslim and Israeli conflict, duality going on. But aren't they both Hebrews? If you read your scripture, it's pretty easy to assess that they're both Hebrews. Now, in this particular situation that I'm talking about, Keem Yisrael, which was promoting Islam with a Israelite name or Israeli name, you could see that you should be able to see the Hebrew connection, because both religions claim that they come out of the so-called seed of Abraham, where they talk about bloodlines, and they think bloodlines is so important because they look at the tribal aspect and that kind of thing, where actually it's a bunch of hogwash in order to brainwash people. And this person, Keem Israel, seems to be a victim of brainwashing. Does that mean he's not responsible for what his hands have done if he has done it? That's a question. He is responsible for that. If that's what's proved, that he did that horrifying act of beheading one of his co-workers. Now, anybody that studies the Hebrew Israelites and watches the news that talks about ISIS, for example, which are the Islamic extremists, they're really big into cutting people's heads off. Now, if you look at the extreme Hebrew Israelite movement, they rejoice and talk about a day where that comes, where they do such things. And so a person who's immersed in that type of propaganda may actually carry out a horrible act like that. Now, over in the Middle East, they train people from little children to do horrible things, such as people who carry around bombs and do terrorist acts and stuff like that. And it's religious training, indoctrination, brainwashing, and all that kind of stuff, which is very dangerous, which these religious groups are involved in. There's no two ways about that. They are involved in religious indoctrination and brainwashing. But anyhow, it's a Hebrew. Okay, here's the pictures from the ancient time. In the Hebrew notion of names, a name denotes the character of the entity. Well, here's the character of this entity. Now, it's actually not Hebrew, and it wasn't Hebrew, but that name had been changed over time. It's actually Avery or Ivory, however you want to particularly pronounce that, but it definitely was not Hebrew. And if you look at the symbols, you have the I, which you can pronounce it I or A, however you want, but it's really not Hebrew. And then we get the B, which is the Ba, and the Ra, and the Ya, which is quite often pronounced I. But anyhow, that's the name. So what do you get out of that? That's the character of a Hebrew. Now, if we go to Hebrew word H5680, which is what I just showed you, which is typically pronounced Ibery or Ibery, and which means an Eberite. That is a Hebrew or descendant of Eber. Now, those pictures that I just showed you can be easily translated as into, and I'll show them to you again. Look into persons, doings. That one that I'm translating as doings, that's an arm, that's a hand. It typically means to work or something like that. It means their doings. It's what they're doing. So what does that make a Hebrew or a Ebery? Well, the Hebrews or Ebery were a form of state or county police that were under the protection of the Yahweh, which were the warlords, and the Elohim, which were the religious people, seeking to make covenants and enforce those covenants. And they had what was considered the power to kill people, that it was okay. They had authority underneath the Yahweh and the Elohim to kill people. Now, such as Abraham, which a scripture that I have coming up here has to do with Abraham. Abraham had such a power that it was considered okay by the Yahweh or the Elohim to do that. Now, when the time of Moses came around, as you would notice, the Ten Commandments, that power was taken away at that point in time. But Moses smashed the tablets, and then he immediately went against the covenant of thou shalt not kill, and he ordered the murder of 3,000 of his citizens. But anyhow, let's continue on this. The Hebrews were a type of sheriff, and there is symbolism that has been retained, such as the star badge. Now, the sheriffs that are currently in the United States of America have that star badge. And that's just symbolism that has been retained over time. And if you look around the world, you'll see that that type of symbolism is still very common. And the Hebrew sheriffs had a dual position to enforce yet protect the clients of the patron-client system. This is the system of government that was occurring for the time of Abraham, the time of Moses, and the times that are related to in your Bible in regards to these particular tribes and people. The patron-client system. The clients are the citizens. The patron is the leader, such as Abraham or Moses. He's the patron, and he's the one who deals with or speaks with or negotiates with the Yahweh and the Elohim, because the government was the religion and the military. This duality is shown in the Hebrew word sheriff. And yes, our name sheriff that we have today, or our title sheriff we have today, that's where it comes from. You don't have to believe me saying that, but I'm telling you that's where it comes from. And sheriff word in Hebrew is H8314, sheriff, and means serpent, as the serpent is the symbol of duality and the name of the congregation identified in Genesis 3 1. Now, I don't expect you to just believe what I say or because I said it. Look for yourself. Look up Sharaf, H8314, and you will see that the meaning of Sharaf is serpent, which is duality, which I just explained to you, the duality of enforcement and protection. That's a duality. Okay, further illustration of the police concept of the Hebrew is found in Genesis 14:13. Genesis 14:13. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, where he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, an Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and these confederate with Abram. Excuse me. Now, the word confederate came from two Hebrew words that were combined together, and the translation came forward as confederate. Those two words are H1167 and H1285. The first word, H1167, is Baal or Baal. Now, Baal, if you take the symbols, the B, the Ba, the A, which is the I symbol, and the L, which is the staff symbol, and you will see that a translation easily comes forward as household watch staff. That's policing, watching the household. You have a staff, which is a group, a congregation, a bunch of people. Could be a singular person, could be the group, but it's a staff. It's like a worker. The household watch staff, they're watching the household. That's policing. That's what the Hebrews were, or the Ibery were. They did so for the Yahweh, and they did so for the Elohim, and it was to make and enforcing and protection of the covenants. Now, if you look at the second word, Barith, which is H1285, and the letters are B-R-Y-T, and the translation is household, person, make, covenant. This is the confederation that's being spoken about between Abram and the others. Abram the Hebrew, Abram the Ivory, Abram the look into person's doings, Abram the sheriff. Okay? Now, that is what it was. And I'm just bringing these forward to present this information to you so you understand actually what's going on in our world. Because this system that I'm talking about is in our world, and it draws no distinction between Islamic Muslim extremists or Hebrew Israelite extremists or Christian extremists or any other extremist group. Okay? They just use them to police other people with the so-called authority to kill. Now, they will persecute and prosecute those people afterwards. Make no mistake about that. They will do that. They will trick these people into doing the most heinous acts and then persecute and prosecute them. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. There was a report that came out from the FBI, an internal report. It was brought to on RT News, which is a Russian news station which brought forth this information. You can look for it yourself. And in this news report, it had shown that internal memos and reports that came from the Freedom of Information Act showed that 94% of terrorist acts that were stopped or interfered with in the United States were caused or started by the FBI themselves. So that's what they did. They tricked people, extremist people, into doing horrible things, or they were about to do a horrible thing, and then they caught them to persecute them and prosecute them. So what's worse? What's worse? You have to think about it as, okay, that person that the FBI tricked, manipulated, and provided the ability to do and carry out heinous acts, would they have done so other than for the fact that that's what had been done to them? Now, most people would say, well, if one of these other extremists grabbed a hold of them, the same result would have happened. But who are these extremists? Are these extremists being controlled by one group? Greed, corruption, that's the group. And you have the FBI, which is corrupting individuals, which is, in a sense, acting the same as the CIA does around the world and corrupting individuals to cause these problems, that these people do not have the infrastructure, do not have the ability, and would not carry out any of these evil acts other than the fact that they were manipulated by this singular group, which people would call the New World Order. It's a disorder. It's horrible. It's terrible. It causes confusion. It causes evilness. It causes craziness. But would it be happening other than the fact that that order exists? I just identified to you what the order is. It's the Ibery, the Ibery. These infrastructures are in place in the Middle East and have been in place for thousands of years and have been manipulating the people of the Middle East for thousands of years. Why is that happening? Well, it's pretty simple why it's happening. There are power in numbers of people. And the people who control everybody are few, and the rest are many. And they have to create this confusion in order to keep the many busy so they don't look at the few. It's that simple. You know, in the United States, there was a movement, they call it the 99% movement, where the movement was about the 99% of the people being controlled by the 1% of the people. It's that same concept. But was that 99% group really controlled by the 1%? Absolutely. Absolutely it was. It always is. It always is. So, where do we stand? Where do we stand in life? Where do we stand in this Hebrew movement? Where do we stand in this chaos? You know, if you look at the extremists on either side of the table, that's the duality, okay? That leaves you in the middle. You're in the middle. Most of the people of the population are stuck in the middle between the two extremists. That's the duality. That's the concept of the serpent, the duality. People in the middle got to step up. They got to step up. But what do they do? What do they do? In the United States, we have the ability to take this beast by the reins and tame this beast. That's what we have to do.